Chapters 19 through 22 of the First Book of the Kings, from the Holy Bible in Modern English, translated by Ferrar Fenton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapter 19. But Achab informed Isabel of all that Eliah had done, and how he had slain all her preachers by the sword. Therefore Isabel sent a messenger to Eliah to say, "May the gods do so to me, and add to it, if your life shall not be like the life of one of them by tomorrow at this time." Then he was afraid, and rose, and went for his life, and arrived at Beersheba, belonging to Judah, and left his attendant there. He, however, went a day's journey into the desert, and sat under a broom tree, and asked for his life to die, and said, "It is enough now, ever-living. Take my life, for I am not better than my fathers." Then he lay down and slept under the broom tree, and saw there a messenger touching him, and saying to him, "Arise and eat." When he looked, he saw at his head baked cakes and a cruse of water. And he ate and drank, and rested, and slept. The messenger of the ever-living, however, returned a second time, and touched him, and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he arose, and ate and drank, and traveled upon that food 40 days and 40 nights, as far as Horeb, the mountain of the ever-living, and went into a cave there, and lodged in it, when the message of the ever-living came to him, and asked, "What do you here, Eliah?" And he replied, "I have been very zealous for the ever-living God of might. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and have slain your preachers with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it." But it was answered, "Go out and station yourself upon the hill in the presence of the ever-living, and see the ever-living pass." Then a great and mighty wind tore the hills, and shivered the crags before the ever-living. The ever-living was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. The ever-living was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. The ever-living was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. And when Eliah heard that, he covered his face with his mantle, and went and stationed himself at the opening of the cave. And the voice addressed him, and asked, "What do you here, Eliah?" When he answered, "I have been very zealous for the ever-living, the God of might. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and have slain your preachers with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it." The ever-living, however, replied to him, "Turn your journey to the desert of Damascus, and go and consecrate Hazael king over Aram, and Jehu king over Israel, and Elisha ben Shaphat of Abal-Macholah consecrate as preacher after you. And then whoever escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill, and whoever escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha will kill. However, there are left to me in Israel 7,000, all of whose knees have not bent to Baal, and all of whose lips have not kissed him." He consequently went from there, and found Elisha ben Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 sets of oxen in his presence. But he was with the 12th set. And Eliah went over to him, and threw his own mantle upon him. So he left the oxen, and ran after Eliah, and said, "I will bid good-bye to my father and mother, then I will follow you." But he replied to him, "Go back. What have I done to you?" So he turned from following, and took the set of oxen, and sacrificed them, and boiled the flesh with the implements of the oxen, and gave it to the people, and they feasted. Then he arose, and went after Eliah, and attended him. Chapter 20. At this time Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, collected all his forces, and 32 chiefs with him, with horse and chariots, and went up and besieged Shomeron, and attacked it, and sent messengers to Achab, king of Israel, to the city, to say to him, "Ben-Hadad says this, Your silver and your gold are mine, and the best of your wives and children are mine." But the king of Israel answered him, and said, "As your majesty says, I and all that I have are yours." Then he sent back the messengers, and they said, "Ben-Hadad says this, Why I ordered to send to you was, to say your silver and gold and wives and children must be given to me. And if not by tomorrow at this time, I will send my officers to you, and they will take possession of your palace and the houses of your ministers, and they shall lay their hands on all that is delightful in your eyes, and take it. The king of Israel consequently summoned the nobles of the country, and said, You know and perceive what injury he seeks, for he has sent to me for my wives, my children, and my silver and gold, and I did not refuse him then. All the nobles and all the people said to him, however, Do not listen to him, and do not consent. So he replied to the messenger of Ben-Hadad, Say to his majesty, All that I promised to your officers before I will do, but I am not able to effect this last command. The messengers consequently went and reported the business. Then Ben-Hadad again sent to him, and said, May the gods do this to me, and add to this, if the dust of Shomeron shall be enough for the souls of the army that is at my feet. But the king of Israel replied and said, They say, Let not the man putting on armor boast like him stripping it off. And when he heard that word, he was drinking with his generals in the tents. So he exclaimed to his officers, Assail the city! A preacher, however, approached to Achab, king of Israel, and said, Thus says the ever-living, Look upon all this great crowd. I will give it into your power today, that you may know that I am the ever-living. But Achab asked, How? When he answered, Thus says the ever-living, By the guards of the provincial governors. Then he asked, Who must command in the battle? And he replied, Yourself. He consequently arranged the guards of the provincial governors, who were 232, and behind them he arranged the whole of the forces of all the children of Israel, 7,000, and they went out at noon. Ben-Hadad meantime had drunk himself drunk in the tents with the 32 chiefs who helped him. But the soldiers of the provincial governors advanced to the front. So Ben-Hadad sent to inquire, and they informed him, saying, Some men are coming out of Shomeron. When he answered, If they come peacefully, seize them at once, and if they come for a fight, seize them at once. But they were the guards of the provincial governors who came from the city with the force which followed them, and they assailed each his man, and Aram fled, and Israel pursued. But Ben-Hadad escaped on a horse with his cavalry. Then the king of Israel advanced and assailed the horse and chariots, and defeated Aram with a crushing defeat. Then a preacher approached the king of Israel and said to him, Go and strengthen yourself, for you should know and foresee what you have to do, because the king of Aram will come back upon you at the spring of next year. The officers of the king of Aram, however, said to him, Their God is a God of the hills, therefore they were stronger than us. But if we fight them in the plain, he will not be able to help them. But this event has made the chiefs return each to his own home. Therefore appoint generals in their place, and collect for yourself an army like the army that was beaten, and with similar cavalry, and similar chariots, and fight them in the plain where they will not be strong. He listened to their advice, and did so. And when the year had turned, Ben-Hadad organized Aram, and advanced to Aphek to fight with Israel. Consequently the children of Israel organized themselves, and provisioned themselves, and marched to meet them. But the Israelites compared to them were like 2 flocks of sheep and goats, while Aram covered the country. But a man of God came and spoke to the king of Israel, and said, Thus says the ever-living, Was not this what Aram said? The ever-living is a God of the hills, and not a God of the plains. Therefore I will give you all this great army to your hand, and you shall know that I am the ever-living. But those encamped, and these encamped for 7 days. On the 7th they joined in battle, and Israel slew of Aram on that single day 100,000 of infantry, and the remainder fled to Aphek to the citadel, but the wall fell upon a crowd of 27 men. The rest, with Ben-Hadad, fled and reached the inner fortress of the city. His ministers then said to him, See now, listen to us, for the kings of the house of Israel are merciful kings. Let us put sacks upon our loins and ropes upon our heads, and go to the king of Israel. Perhaps he will spare your life. They accordingly bound sacks upon their waists, and ropes on their heads, and came to the king of Israel, and said, Your servant Ben-Hadad asks, Will you let me live? When he answered, He shall live. He is my brother. But the men watched and made haste, and confirmed it from themselves, and said, Your brother Ben-Hadad. Then he said, Go, fetch and bring him. So they went and brought Ben-Hadad to him, and he made him mount into his own chariot, when he said, The cities that my father took from your father I will restore, and also return to Shomeron the suburbs at Damascus, as your father held them. I will cede them to you. So he made a compact with him that he should hand them to him. A man, however, belonging to the profession of the preachers, said to his companion, I wish you would assault me. But he hesitated to wound him. So he said to him, Say, why have you not listened to the voice of the ever-living? In consequence, when you leave me, a lioness will assail you. And when he went from his side, he met a lioness, and she assailed him. Then he met another man, and said, I wish you would assault me. So that man assaulted, and wounded him. Then the preacher went and stationed himself awaiting the king on the road. But he had rolled in the dust up to his eyes, and when the king passed, he shrieked out to the king, and said, Your servant was in the heart of the battle, and an officer brought to me a man, and said, Guard this man. If he escapes, your life shall be for his life, or you shall pay a talent of silver. But whilst your servant was walking here and there, he vanished. The king of Israel, however, answered, Consequently, you are convicted by your own statement. Then he at once swept the dust from his face, when the king of Israel recognized him as belonging to the preachers, for he exclaimed, Thus says the ever-living, Why have you freed this cursed fellow from your power? Therefore your life shall be for his life, and your people for his people. So the king of Israel went to his palace sad and gloomy, and came to Shomeron. Chapter 21. The following was after these events. Naboth the Jezreelite possessed a vineyard at Jezreel at the side of the park of Achab, king of Shomeron. And Achab spoke to Naboth, and said, Sell me your vineyard, and let it be mine for a flower garden, for it is near the side of my house, and I will give you in exchange a better vineyard than it, or if preferable in your opinion, I will pay you money for the purchase. Naboth, however, replied to Achab, It would be a grief to me if I sold you my ancestral property. Achab consequently went to his home sad and gloomy over the reply Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him, when he said, I will not sell you my ancestral property. Therefore he lay on his couch and turned his face, and would not eat food. Isabel, his wife, consequently came to him and asked, What is the matter that your spirit is depressed, and you will not take food? And he told her about Naboth of Jezreel, what he replied when, I asked him, Sell me your vineyard for money, or if it pleases you, I will give you a vineyard instead of it. But he answered, I will not sell you my vineyard. Isabel, his wife, however, exclaimed, Show now that you rule over Israel. Get up and eat bread and rest your heart. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth of Jezreel. She consequently wrote letters in the name of Achab, and sealed the letters with his seal, to the judges and freemen of the village where Naboth resided, and wrote in the letters to say, Proclaim a feast, and put Naboth at the head of the people. Then set up 2 scoundrels against him, and instruct them to say, You have libeled God and the king, and let them drag him out and stone and kill him. The judges and freemen who lived in his village consequently prepared the men in the way Isabel had sent to them in the letter she had written. They proclaimed a feast, and put Naboth at the head of the people, and brought the 2 villains, and set them against him. And the scoundrels accused Naboth before the people, saying, Naboth libeled God and the king. They consequently dragged him outside the village, and stoned and murdered him. Then they sent to Isabel to say, That Naboth has been stoned, and is dead. And when Isabel heard that Naboth was stoned and killed, then Isabel said to Achab, Get up, seize the vineyard of Naboth of Jezreel, which he refused to sell to you for money, for Naboth is no longer alive, but dead. So when Achab learned that Naboth was dead, Achab arose to go up to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to seize it. But the command of the ever-living came to Eliah the Tishbite to say, Arise, go and meet Achab the king of Israel, who is in Shomeron. Meet him at the vineyard of Naboth, which he has gone to seize, and address him, saying, Thus says the ever-living, in the place where the dogs licked the blood of Naboth, the dogs shall lick your blood, even yours. But Achab replied to Eliah, Have you found me, my enemy? And he answered, I have met you, because you have sold yourself to do evil in the sight of the ever-living. Hence I bring evil to you, and I send a fire after you, and will cause to cut off from Achab every boy and girl and nursling in Israel. And I will make your family like the family of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the family of Baasha ben Achira, for the insult with which they insulted and sinned in Israel. And the ever-living also says to Isabel, The dogs shall eat Isabel in the district of Jezreel. Whoever of Achab is killed in the city, the dogs shall eat, and whoever killed in the fields, the fowls of the skies shall devour, because there has been none like Achab, who has sold himself to do evil in the sight of the ever-living with Isabel his wife, and has foully defiled himself by going after idols in the way the Amorites did, whom the ever-living drove from before the children of Israel. When, however, Achab heard these messages, he tore his robes and put a sack upon his body, and fasted, and slept in sackcloth, and went sighing. Consequently the message of the ever-living came to Eliah the Tishbite, to say, Do you see how Achab humbles himself before me? Therefore, because he humbles himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days. In the days of his son I will bring the evil on his family. Chapter 22. Now for a space of 3 years there was no war between Aram and Israel. But in the 3rd year Jehoshaphat king of Judah came to see the king of Israel, when the king of Israel said to his ministers, You know that Ramoth-Gilead is ours, yet we delay in taking it from the hand of the king of Aram. He also said to Jehoshaphat, Will you go with me to attack Ramoth-Gilead? And Jehoshaphat replied to the king of Israel, You are the same as myself. My people and your people are the same. My cavalry are your cavalry. But, said Jehoshaphat to the king of Israel, I wish you to inquire at the same time for the command of the ever-living. The king of Israel consequently invited 400 men of the preachers, and asked them, Shall we go up to Ramoth-Gilead to attack it, or let it alone? And they answered, Go up, and Adonai will give it into the power of the king. Jehoshaphat, however, asked, Is there not here also a preacher of the ever-living who could be asked about it? When the king of Israel replied to Jehoshaphat, There is only one man to ask Jehovah about it, but I hate him, for he never preaches good about me, but bad, Micaiah ben Imlah. Jehoshaphat, however, answered, Do not say so, king. Therefore the king of Israel called to one of his officers, and said, Fetch Micaiah ben Imlah. But the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, sat each on his throne, clothed in their royal robes in the marketplace near the gate of Shomeron. And all the preachers preached before them, and Zedekiah the son of Chenaanah had made iron horns, and exclaimed, Thus says the ever-living, With these you shall push Aram to destruction. And all the preachers preached the same, saying, Go up to Ramoth-Gilead and prosper, for the Lord will give it to the power of the king. The messenger also, who had gone to invite Micaiah, addressed him, saying, Look now, the messages of the preachers are unanimously good to the king. Come now, talk in accordance with them, and speak good. But Micaiah replied, By the life of the ever-living, that which the ever-living commands me, I shall speak. So they came to the king, and the king asked him, Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth-Gilead to attack it, or shall we let it alone? When he replied to him, Go up and prosper, for the ever-living will give it into the power of the king. But the king exclaimed, How many times must I swear you that you will not speak to me except truly in the name of the ever-living? Then he answered, I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills like sheep who have no shepherd, and the ever-living asked, Have these no leader who can lead them back to their homes in safety? Then the king of Israel exclaimed to Jehoshaphat, Did I not tell you that he never preached good to me, but bad? He consequently continued, Therefore, hear the message of the ever-living.
I saw the ever-living sitting on his throne, and all the army of the heavens stationed near him, on the right hand and on the left, when the ever-living asked, Who will entice Achab to go up and fall at Ramoth-Gilead? And one suggested this way, and another suggested that. Then a spirit came and stood before the ever-living and said, I will entice him. But the ever-living asked him, How? And he replied, I will go and become a spirit of deception in the mouths of all his preachers. When he answered, You shall entice him and also succeed. Go and do so. Therefore you see the ever-living has put a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all these preachers of yours, but the ever-living has decided evil against you. Then Zedekiah ben Kenana advanced and struck Micaiah on his cheek, and demanded, How did this spirit from the ever-living pass over from me to speak to you? When Micaiah answered, You will see on the day when you go to an inner chamber to hide yourself. The king of Israel, however, exclaimed, Seize Micaiah, and conduct him to the castle of the governor of the city, and Joash the king's son, and say, The king orders thus, Put this fellow into solitary confinement, and feed him with bread of affliction and water of affliction, until I return in safety. But Micaiah answered, If you return in safety, the ever-living has not spoken by me. Then he added, Listen, all you people. The king of Israel and Jehoshaphat king of Judah consequently advanced against Ramoth-Gilead, when the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat king of Judah, I will disguise myself and go into the battle, but you dress yourself in your robes. So the king of Israel disguised himself and went to battle. The king of Aram, however, had ordered his 32 officers of the charioteers, saying, You need not fight with little or great, but only with a king of Israel. Consequently, when the commanders of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they thought, This is the king of Israel, and they wheeled against him to fight. But Jehoshaphat cried out, so when the commanders of the chariots discovered that he was not the king of Israel, they turned away from him. A man, however, drew a bow at random and struck the king of Israel between the joints of his armor, when he said to his charioteer, Turn your hand, and carry me from the fight, for I am wounded. So he left the battle at once, yet the king was supported in the chariot facing Aram, but died in the afternoon, and his blood from his wound poured into the bottom of the chariot. When sunset came, the word was passed to the camp to other, Each to his village, and each to his country. And they brought the dead king to Shomeron, where they buried the king. When the chariot was washed at the pool in Shomeron, the dogs licked his blood where the harlots washed themselves, according to the word of the ever-living which he had spoken. But the rest of the affairs of Achab, and all he did, and the white marble palace he built, and all the towns he erected, they are written of in the history of the events of the times of the kings of Israel. When he slept with his fathers, Achaziah his son reigned in his place. Jehoshaphat ben Asa began to reign over Judah in the 4th year of Achab king of Israel. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old at his coronation, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Azubah, daughter of Shibach. He walked in the path of Asa his father. He did not turn from doing right in the sight of the ever-living, except that he did not throw down the columns. The people still sacrificed and offered incense at the columns. Jehoshaphat also was at peace with the king of Israel. For the rest of the affairs of Jehoshaphat, and the great things he achieved, and how he fought, they are recorded in the history of events in the days of the kings of Judah. However, the remainder of the Sodomites who escaped in the days of his father Asa, he expelled from the country. There was no king in Edom. He appointed a king. Jehoshaphat built ships for Tharshish to go to Alphar for gold, but they did not go, for the ships were wrecked at Zion-Gabar. Then Achaziah, son of Achab, proposed to Jehoshaphat, Let my servants and your servants go with the ships. But Jehoshaphat was not willing. When Jehoshaphat slept with his fathers, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and Joram his son reigned after him. Achaziah ben Achab began to reign over Israel in Shomeron in the 17th year of Jehoshaphat king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. But he did wrong in the eyes of the ever-living, and walked in the way of his father, and the way of his mother, and in the way of Jeroboam ben Nebat, who made Israel sin.
For he served Baal, and worshipped him, and provoked the ever-living, the God of Israel, in all that his ancestors did. The end of chapters 19 through 22, and the end of the first book of the Kings, from the Holy Bible in Modern English, translated by Ferrar Fenton. Recording by Mark Penfold.